Hey there, Brian Roisentul here. I'm the host of the Fit Growth Machine podcast. And today we have a great episode as we are going to talk about e-commerce leadership, growth, and zero-party data, among other interesting things. Before introducing today's guest, let me tell you that this episode is brought to you by BSR Digital. At BSR Digital, we help e-commerce brands that want to scale their business to the next level through Facebook, Instagram, and Google Ads. BSR Digital knows that most e-commerce brands want to grow their sales, but they lack a solid plan and professional team to help them succeed. That's why we offer strategic plans, implementations, optimizations, and account audits to help more than 1,000 e-commerce brands like yours grow their business and surpass their competitors. To learn more, you can visit us at bsrdigital.com, and you can also email us at hello@bsrdigital.com. So today, as promised, I have Gary Penn. He's a 25-year veteran in e-business. That's a lot of experience. He's currently an e-commerce practice consultant with Chameleon Collective and interim leader in the industry. He's made his career helping build teams and driving business at brands like Quicksilver, True Religion, Columbia Sportswear, and most recently at Nixon. Hey, Gary, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So what I told you already is really interesting to me. So why don't you tell the audience, what's your story?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So as you noted, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've worked for a variety of global brands, and I'm proud to have helped a lot of those brands build great e-commerce teams, e-commerce practice, select platforms, re-platform, fixed marketing teams, fixed service teams, you name it. E-com tends to be an octopus that touches all areas of the business. And I've taken that experience now over to Chameleon Collective, where I'm an independent consultant amongst over 100 other independent consultants. And at Chameleon, it's decent size. And we stay busy because at Chameleon, we have a model that allows us to work with small and large businesses. Most consulting companies can't work with small clients because the overhead for them makes small engagements really unprofitable. And because we work directly with customers with high-end talent, we can jump in, analyze the situation, form a team of other chameleons if necessary, work on the internal team, help with org structures, help improve things. And then our goal is to exit. We don't want to be there forever, which is a very different model than most other agents are offering. So that's how we've been successful so far. And I think our ability to band together and work as a team, even though we're independent, has given us a lot of success.
That's great. I mean, when it comes to e-commerce, there are so many moving parts, right? It's not only the front end that you put something online on a website and then you sell like magic. It doesn't work that way, right? So there are a lot of moving parts, and we have covered a lot of them throughout the episodes so far. But one that we haven't talked about a lot is leadership, right? Because it's a key element for any company, but specifically for e-commerce brands, it's really key. So what can you say about that? When do you think that it's the right time, based on your experience, to bring a leader for the e-commerce?
That's an excellent question. It really depends on the unique situation of each business. It also depends on the size of the business and where the brands are. Here's the reality for most businesses. It's expensive to bring in leaders. And when you're in a time of change or great transformation of a business, sometimes you don't know if you want a full-time employee, an FTE in place. And if you do, you might not know what the skill set of that individual needs to be. So having the flexibility for fractional resources or interim resources is a very powerful thing to be able to offer up to businesses. When's the right time to bring in an interim leader? It often is situational. So if you have a PE firm that buys a business or is analyzing what their investment looks like, oftentimes they want to know, hey, what is our org structure supposed to be? How is this business supposed to interact? What is the long-term roadmap look like? What does the long-term prospect of the e-commerce business look like? Do we have the right tech stack in place? You go on and on. And oftentimes what's needed is some expertise to come in, which is why agencies exist in the first place and consultants exist in the first place. You could come in, land, help a business set up operationally for success, and then have a FTE resource take that plan and execute. So for instance, if you have, take a startup, you may be looking at, wow, how do we go to market? Who is our customer? What's our voice of customer research say? What does our market research say? There might not be expertise in-house to drive that at a CMO level. That's a very, very expensive resource to bring on from day one. But you could bring in an interim resource and have a great deal of success in a short amount of time, and then hand that to a director of marketing. You could do the same thing for e-commerce. You can set up a roadmap, do a tech stack analysis, have a conversion analysis, comprehensively look at the program, and then hand that to a director of e-commerce or even a VP of e-commerce and have that individual run. It essentially provides an outline for success.
Makes sense at all. And that's not the only moving part at all, right? I mean, there are many others and many decisions to be made at different phases or stages of the business. As you say, if you're getting started, it makes sense probably to not have a full-time employee doing as a CMO. Let's say that would be very expensive. What about the service, the logistics, the marketing? What do you think about that in terms of should that be in, should that be out? When is it the right time to bring it in or out?
That's a complex question. It's certainly easy to have identified areas of need for leadership amongst marketing, amongst e-commerce, even amongst products sometimes. If you're lost in a sea of sameness and you're stuck as a business, oftentimes your practices just repeat themselves over and over. And so having a fractional resource or interim leader come in can be very beneficial. When it gets to things like logistics, oftentimes that's more of a project-based outcome in terms of what is required. You probably have somebody that's running logistics. They probably know all of the vendors, all of the factories, all of the shipping dates, all of the delivery dates, the go-to-market dates. It's hard to have somebody come in and just own that from day one. But what you can have is external opinions on what can help optimize the flow, what can help with profitability, what can help with boosting margin. And that's where fractional leaders can come in some of these other areas, with logistics operations being one of them.
Okay, awesome. And what about the e-commerce platforms? That's probably another moving part, right? There are a lot of them. We said that already. So what do you think about it? I mean, how do you know which one to choose? Why?
Yeah, well, you're speaking my language there, Brian. This happens to be an area that I'm super passionate about. I've, in 20 years, worked on 8 different platforms for e-commerce. I think I've done over a dozen platform implementation, re-platform implementations, integrations, middleware, worked with IT on ERP upgrades, et cetera. So e-com platforms is something that I'm very passionate about. And I actually, in a very sick way, I somehow enjoy doing it. I don't know why. Everybody else in the industry seems to hate re-platforming. I seem to enjoy it for some reason. But how do you know what to choose? Again, it depends on the business. And that's where individuals can come in and help with the third-party perspective, answer the question, well, what do I need? Do I need to go headless or not? Okay, great. Is that just a buzzword, or do people actually know what headless is? Do they understand what mock architecture is? Do they understand the difference between the upper right quadrant players of the e-commerce platforms that are analyzed by Gartner. So just looking at the upper right quadrant, just to take an example, you have Salesforce and you have Commerce Tools. Both really legit players in the market. Know people at both organizations, have stellar individuals, great resources working there. Well, how do you know which one to go to? It's really dependent upon the business, and there are so many inputs that determine whether or not you need to be headless, whether you need to have a full platform, whether you need to have a more modular approach to your e-commerce business or to re-platforming. There's a million pieces that go into making the pie.
Why do you love it so much?
Well, that's a great question. Why do I love?
What do you love about it?
e-com?
What challenges
Yeah.
do you love about it the most, for example?
You know, there's something about my background in particular, I think, that leads me to platforms. I happen to be, not to speak too much about myself versus the industry, but I happen to have come up in a background from IT. When I first started out of school and actually in university, I was running the computer lab, I ran networks, I understood from a very early age how to translate geek to English. And that's a very important skill set for the C-suite. Because as soon as you start talking about DNS and headless and ROAS and throwing out terms that are very digital that we throw around every day in our industry, to a CEO who might have come up in merchandising or might just be an entrepreneur, it can be very confusing and it's very easy to get lost in the weeds. So to me, platforms enabled me to speak that language throughout my career. I can get in the nitty gritty. I can talk to developers, to SI, system integrators, talk to platform sales folks. I can really roll around in the weeds, and then I can digest that, transform it, come up 3 levels, and hopefully help a business pitch that to the C-suite to make a successful project.
Okay. So you're mentioning something that I wanted to ask you about, that it's actually the communication between, team members and departments, because you're talking about communication and how to be clear and deliver a message that it's clear and something that, non-technical people can understand. But what about, overall, the communication between departments and team members in an organization?
I'll tell you something I learned from an old mentor of mine when I was at Columbia. I'll attribute it to his name, to Scott Kerslake. Scott was the founder of Athleta and a very successful leader and CEO. And I remember day one when I was working for the Prana brand, I came in and Scott said, based on what we know about you, you are going to be the cross-functional leader of this area that is direct-to-consumer. And I don't even think I had heard the term cross-functional before. I knew about the importance of communicating between teams, and I understood how to do it on Slack or through channels, or how to have meetings, but I don't think I really understood the power of it until I digested that, because direct-to-consumer consists of service and post-purchase service and pre-purchase showrooming and product data and IT integrations and platforms and vendor management. I could go on and on and on. Because it touches so many things, by definition, you're not going to own all those pieces. Not all those pieces are going to report up to you as an e-commerce leader, even if you're a leader of an entire department, even if you're a leader of an entire section of the business, you're still not going to own everything. The only way that you're going to have success is to work cross-functionally, understanding that we all are in it together, and we're either going to all rise together or we're going to all fall together. And the same goes, honestly, a good example of that I learned early on is, think about the original challenges of brands going direct to consumer that had previously been wholesale. It was all about channel conflict and, oh my God, our dealers are going to freak out because you're selling online and you're going to undercut us. And these are still real problems that are out there, but they've been tempered. They've been tempered only because the consumer has demanded that they be tempered. But rather than just having the consumer demand it, why not transform your business to be collaborative so that sales and D2C or sales and B2C are working in lockstep together so that in the US you can have MAP compliance, overseas you can't have MAP, but you can have a direction so that pricing is directionally correct in the market, where that you understand when your dealers are going on sale, even if you can't control how or the depth of that overseas. And if you can get that cross-functional collaboration going, it'll help a great deal down the road, just in terms of understanding your customers.
Yeah, 100%. I've been there working for some brands that they are really big. They have a lot of, let's say partners or resellers, and they sell offline mainly. And when it was the time a few years ago before the pandemic to open the online store, the leadership wasn't, I mean, they didn't want to do it, right? So in the end, what ended up happening was that they actually fired the CEO and brought a new one because they were reluctant to change. And I know they did a really like really awesome events every year by the end of the year for those offline, let's say resellers and part of the sales force, and they loved them. They loved those events. They were very engaging, and they really had a huge community, and like those people like really cared for each other. But when they started talking about the online, the conflict there was huge because it's like us versus them, and it wasn't probably the right conversation to have. It's not the way you want to handle that. So as you said, there are a lot of ways to move to make that work. I think, I don't know your take on this, but I think the pandemic did a lot like to make things work in this direction, right? It accelerated a lot of changes that were meant to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did accelerate things, but well, here's what's interesting to me and what I've witnessed recently is what comes up must go down. And that hasn't been the case with B2C since its inception. So I think for the first time last quarter or the prior quarter, we started to see a decline or at least a flattening of B2C across industry verticals, which is unheard of. And I think a lot of that is because there was such a rapid acceleration during COVID. But what comes on the flip side of that is the teams that are running direct to consumer within businesses are, during COVID, were given carte blanche. Some of them open checkbooks, some of them open resource capabilities and, hey, hire 5 more people. Some of them dump money into campaigns because at the beginning, ROAS was through the roof because there was more consumers online generating more traffic. There was all kinds of changes that put the hands of the D2C operators into the cookie jar. That's not a bad thing, but coming out the other side of that, there probably needs to be balance. And balancing the other way means sometimes negotiating or giving up things the other way, right? Negotiating is a two-way street. And just like sales teams might have given up something when retail was closed, that shift needs to happen back the other direction now. It needs to be recognized by businesses to be equivalent in both directions so that there's a little bit of love given all around. Because the reality is that for omni-channel businesses, the channels feed each other. That's why it's omni-channel. It's omnidirectional. Oftentimes, I think people think of an omni-channel business of, oh, now we have two channels generating revenue. I would argue against that. I think you have multiple channels that work together as a singular customer experience that generate revenue. So when you take out a chunk of the customer experience, it's like having surgery, right? You just took off your left arm and expect that the whole body's going to work the same. It doesn't. So when you get the arm back, you kind of have to rebalance and gain back that, to come back to the term, that cross-functional work environment.
Yeah. So talking a little bit more about the platforms and about the ad platforms now, I'm talking about Facebook ads. Um, yeah, I know we wanted to discuss zero-party data. So for those in the audience that are not familiar with the term, can you please explain what it is? And yeah, we can take it from there then, probably what it is, what strategies are working now, and dive a little bit deep on that.
Yeah, in terms of zero-party data, let's take out the buzzwords of, third, first, zero. What's the difference? Fundamentally, is a consumer going to offer up data to you that you didn't have originally? That's the definition of zero-party data. Of, hey, Brian, I'm going to ask you, as a two-time purchaser of X brand, hey, you've bought this shampoo 2 times. We would love to know if you're also interested in other products. So maybe the zero-party data is asking you for how you identify in terms of gender, because that might help in terms of a product line selection. That's information that's not usually gathered somewhere else. So that could be volunteered by the consumer to the brand if asked in the right format and with the right political correctness, because that's a sensitive topic. The other piece that somebody could ask is, hey, we have 6 different shampoo, conditioner products that we're thinking about putting into the market. Would you be willing to tell us which one sounds best to you? Because we're testing names of the products. Those are both types of zero-party data. They're very different. One is demographic and very personal. One is opinion and polling, but both are volunteered by the consumer back to the brand. That type of data is what's helping brands to be able to segment and optimize their messaging more and understand their consumers better. They go together, but they're slightly different. And they're both very powerful. Understanding the demographics and who your consumer is down to a level where they actually volunteer the information is super powerful, because you can get a better idea of what they want. Also, understanding what their opinions are about products or transactions or brands or affinity is also super, super important. So if you can combine those things together, now you have the blend that is the ripe fruit ready for the picking to have a better marketing program.
Yeah, 100%. So in a recent episode that didn't air at the time of this recording, at least, we discussed a lot about the different type of data you can gather online and how to make the most out of them. I mean, there's so much data online to leverage and to use, and all of them are different. You can gather data yourself. You can have these, as they say, first-party data as well, and collect the data is really important. But what if you don't have enough, or what if you need more? Who doesn't need more? But what if you're getting started and you don't even have a list or anything like that, a following or someone to talk to and to ask questions to? So there are ways you can leverage, in life, in business, and why not in ads, there are ways to leverage someone else's success, right? And efforts. So one thing we have been discussing lately is, for example, if you're partnering up with a company, with an influencer or whoever you're partnering up with, why don't you take it to the next level so both of you can actually leverage the data? So in this case, I don't know, I'll probably mention this briefly. It's that if you are a brand and you today collaborations, as you said, and many other ways of partnering up with someone else or with another brand or influencer are really important. Now people buy from experiences, right? Not only products, they buy from experiences. They stand for something or want the brands they buy from to stand for something as well. And those collaborations happen in different ways, shapes, and forms. So you can do an entire collection for that influencer, or you can have those people to actually post something and that's it. But what if you go to a different level and besides doing whatever you're still doing, you want to actually ask them to share their pixel, to share, it's basically to share their data with you so you can actually target their followers, their visitors to the website, their buyers, their community to their benefit as well. Because of course you want to make it a win-win. So for example, they can share their pixel with you, with your brand, and then you can promote their thing, right? So those are not new ways, but ways that are not really common to see I mean, I don't see many brands doing that, and it's another way of, let's say, overcoming the iOS 14 update. You know, this loss of data, loss of tracking. It's a different way of gathering more information.
It's interesting. It's an interesting idea. It strikes me as a great idea because by its very definition, it's organic. Because think about it this way, if you're mining Facebook for data pre-iOS 14, before things went south for digital marketers, you could build an audience of individuals based on Facebook's data. That's still third-party data. It's Facebook's data. Facebook's data, now, it was successful. I'm not going to argue that Facebook's data wasn't good. They're probably one of the world's largest data companies by the time iOS 14 rolled around and disrupted things. But what you're suggesting is on more of a micro level, you can organically choose individuals or groups of consumers or potential consumers who would resonate with the brand because the brand is working with an influencer that's trusted by the brand, and the brand trusts the influence. And the influencer trusts the brand. It's both directions. So if you have something where there's an inherent trust there, wouldn't the audience of that influencer also trust? Yeah, I mean, you could do it through a paid advertisement. That's a little less organic. But if you have somebody that's a team member or part of a street team for a consumer brand, for a band, for a music band, there's street teams, right? There's tons of places where street teams come into effect. If you could get those individuals to share to their individuals, not just through a post, but through pixel tracking, I'll call it. Tracking is a bad term. You end up getting a broader reach into who your consumers are. And it's all through relationships as opposed to just data mining, which to me sounds really interesting.
100%. So, yeah, I mean, this has been really interesting. And in general, before wrapping up, I love to ask the guest to share with the audience any book that they loved and helped them. I don't know, in this case, if you have any about leadership or anything else, and then the same about mentors that or advisors that you have had.
Advisors that I've had, I feel like I've had some good ones. I mentioned Scott earlier. You guys heard me mention Scott Kerslake, who's just an amazing leader that I feel very, very fortunate to have worked with. I also have had great leaders. I was lucky enough back early in my career to work with a gentleman named Michael Tasuji, who is the ex-CIO for Disney, for Gap, extremely tenured individual, and he has been a mentor that I've turned to multiple times throughout my career, not just when I was at the business with him, but afterward. I think it's really important to find those individuals and encourage them to help you think different. Hopefully a good leader will do that anyway. I remember the very first boss that I worked for, or I'll call it the president of the company, because he actually was a couple levels above me. When I moved to California over, 24 years ago, he sat me down in his office one day and he said, "Where do you want to go in your career?" And it wasn't, at that age, I'm not really sure that I understood the opening that was possible. I just knew what I was doing, and I saw, I could see a year out, I could see 5 years out, but who could see 20 years out? Especially, I was at the forefront of digital innovation, so who could really predict what's going to happen? But he kind of shook things up and he said, "Okay, well, that's great that you want to do X in your career. How much money do you want to make?" And it wasn't because he was going to pay me that right on the spot. It was to get my brain working in a different manner than it had worked before. And I literally couldn't comprehend. I thought to myself, well, I don't know, 50% more than I make now? But this is the beginning of my career, right? Most people make a lot more than 50% more than they make on day one when they graduate from college or they leave high school. They grow over a course of decades and change things around, and they're compensated in different ways. And I just had never thought that way. So having a mentor that can make you think outside the box, and all the individuals I've mentioned, that individual was Doug Fabian. So Doug, if you happen to ever listen, thank you for that. But all those individuals made me think differently about my career, about what I'm doing, about what I could accomplish as an individual and where I want to go as a human being. And to me, that goes way, way outside of just what's inside a business. And it's so, so powerful. So if you're leaders that are out there, I'm sure there's lots of directors of e-com or managers of people that are listening to this. Ask your employees what they want to do. Make them think bigger. And hopefully they will be inspired as individuals to be bigger. It's really a unique concept.
That's great advice you got and you're giving right now as well. We are moving so fast. Everything is moving so fast. And we never stop to think, where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? Sure, when we are kids, we say, "I want to be an astronaut. I want to be that." That's probably the last time we ask ourselves, what do we want to be? Everything moves so fast. We finish high school and we need to decide what we want to be. And then we are frustrated. And then we end up working of whatever, but what we, I don't know, studied, or it happens to many of us, right? And then we start working and we are in autopilot. I mean, I'm in this e-commerce, in this agency mastermind. A shout out to Jason Swank, a great guy, great coach. And he always says that every, at least agency owner, starts by accident. I didn't plan to become an agency owner. I come from the background of computer science. I never, you said it with the salary. You thought, hey, 50% more. I didn't even think about becoming the owner of an agency, doing marketing and not software development. So things move really fast, and people like those are the ones that you should stop and listen to their advice and take the time to listen to yourself as well and see what you want.
Yeah, if there's any advice that I have for folks, it's follow your heart. Quote I heard recently, I forget who the quote's attributed to, is that the three biggest addictions for human beings are heroin, carbohydrates, and a biweekly paycheck. So it's hopefully none of us are on heroin it's really hard to give up carbs. And so the only choice that you really have is, do you want to stray from a biweekly paycheck? Some of us do and some of us don't. But if your heart tells you to do so, then take the risk and try it.
100%. Well, this has been awesome. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think that will benefit the audience?
Something I think we've had a great conversation. My only remarks would be, if anything that I said today was interesting, then feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Gary Penn. I'm open. I don't have a hidden profile. Go ahead and link in with me. And if you're interested in working with me through Chameleon, I'd be happy to talk to you. So please reach out.
That's awesome. As always, there will be show notes for the episodes, a full page of show notes with all the resources mentioned here, linked there, including Gary's profile and Chameleon's website as well. So yeah, it was a pleasure having you on. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brian, for the opportunity. Great to talk to you.